I hadn't even finished unpacking my bag when I noticed the first difference between Mason and the man I was dating. Mason looked me in the eyes. He didn't glance at his phone. He didn't nod absently. He just watched me, curious, quiet, and still. "Eli, right?" he said, leaning against the wooden doorframe with a smirk that belonged in a movie, not a lakeside cabin. "Didn't expect you to show up. Derek said your boyfriend's the possessive type." "He's busy," I said, trying not to let the defensive tone slip into my voice. "Deadlines. Work." Mason chuckled under his breath, then nodded toward the lake. "You know what's better than deadlines?" I waited. "Sunlight on skin." I laughed despite myself and turned back to unpacking. He didn't move. He just stood there, like a challenge I hadn't agreed to meet yet. The trip was Derek's idea. My best friend since high school, he'd invited me to their family cabin for a getaway, which really meant get your head out of that relationship for a few days. "You're allowed to take space," Derek had said over the phone. "He's not a prison warden. You're a person, Eli." He had a point. Jordan and I hadn't been right for months. Texts turned into voice note. Voice notes turned into delays. Delays turned into distance. I missed the version of us that used to reach for each other in sleep. The cabin was surrounded by trees that smelled like memory, pine and cedar and summer sweat. The dock stretched out into the lake like an invitation. It should have felt like peace. Instead, it felt like something was waiting to happen. Derek had gone into town to pick up groceries, leaving me alone with Mason. I wandered through the house, still getting used to the place. There were photos of the brothers on the wall. Mason always slightly off to the side, never quite center, always somehow watching even in the background. He wasn't what I expected. Taller, calmer, less boyish than Derek. His body carried itself like someone used to control, not through force but presence. Like he didn't ask for attention, but it always arrived anyway. We shared a beer on the porch that evening. The golden hour filtered across his face, softening the edges of his jaw, warming the space between us. "So," he said, "what's Jordan like?" I blinked. "Excuse me." He didn't repeat the question, just raised an eyebrow and waited. I hesitated. "He's smart. Ambitious. Works in tech. You know, kind of always solving problems, even when you're not asking him to." Mason took a sip, then licked the foam from his lip. "And are you a problem?" "Excuse me." He smirked. "You said he solves problems. I'm just wondering if he sees you as one." The question landed like a slap dressed in velvet. I didn't answer. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, not uncomfortable, but undeniable. Finally, he said, "You shrink when you talk about him." I looked away. "I don't shrink." "You do," he said, gently this time. "But you don't have to. Not here." I exhaled slowly, staring out at the lake. "Why are you watching me so closely?" He didn't miss a beat. "Because you're interesting when you think no one's looking." That night I couldn't sleep. Jordan hadn't replied to my last message, a picture of the lake and a casual "you'd like this" left on read. No emoji. No follow-up. I rolled over, stared at the wooden beams above me, and tried not to think about the way Mason's eyes had lingered when I'd pulled off my shirt earlier, sweaty from the afternoon sun. I didn't know if I wanted to be wanted, or if I just wanted to be seen again. The next morning, I stepped out of the shower and found Mason in the kitchen, shirtless, brewing coffee like he owned the world. He handed me a mug without a word. Our fingers touched. Just for a second. It was enough. Later, while Derek was out running an errand, Mason passed me in the hallway and said, without looking, "Going to my room in a bit. Door might be locked." "Might not." I froze. He turned the corner and disappeared, his voice floating back lazily. "Trust me." I told myself I wouldn't go near his room. I told myself I wouldn't even look in that direction. I'd make coffee, clean up, maybe sit by the lake until Derek returned. Stay distracted. Stay good. But good was starting to feel like a role I'd outgrown. The hallway creaked under my bare feet as I passed Mason's door. It was ajar. Light streamed in through half-drawn curtains. His duffel bag was half-zipped on the floor, a glass of water sat untouched on the nightstand. No music. No sound. I turned away. Eli. His voice slid through the space like smoke. Low. Calm. Dangerous. I turned slowly. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, shirtless, one hand resting lazily on his knee. His eyes met mine with that same unreadable heat. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond, but I didn't move either. He stood up, walked toward the door, and with a soft click, locked it. That sound, that single, tiny sound undid something inside me. I should have said no. I should have unlocked it again and walked out. But I didn't. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, head tilted slightly. "Tell me to stop." "You haven't done anything," I said, voice barely audible. He stepped closer. "Yet." The silence stretched. It wasn't awkward, it was sharp, humming with electricity. "I'm not here to ruin your relationship," Mason said, his voice low, steady. "I'm here because you need someone to stop pretending you're satisfied." I swallowed hard. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're starving," he said. "For touch. For presence. For someone who doesn't just respond to you when it's convenient." He took another step. I didn't back away. "Does he still touch you?" he asked. I blinked. "That's not your business." He smiled faintly. "It is if you've forgotten how it feels." His fingers brushed mine, just a ghost of a touch, but my skin erupted like it had been asleep too long. My breath caught. "You're shaking," he whispered. "No, I'm not," I lied. "Then why won't you move?" "Because I didn't want to. Because something about the way he stood there, so certain, so still, made me feel seen. Wanted. Not out of habit or history, but right now, as I was. He took my hand gently. Didn't pull. Didn't force. Just waited. "I'm not asking for forever," he said. "Just honesty." The first kiss was slow. Careful. He didn't devour me. He read me. His lips brushed mine like a question, not a demand. And when I didn't pull away, he deepened it, his fingers grazing my jaw, his breath merging with mine. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. When his hand slid under the hem of my shirt, I didn't stop him. I tilted into it. I let the ache win. His mouth trailed to my neck, then back to my lips, as if he couldn't decide where he wanted me more. "Still think this is a mistake?" he murmured. "Yes," I breathed. "But I don't care." We didn't go all the way. Not yet. It was almost worse, how much tension we let sit between us. He pinned me to the door with his body and whispered things that made my knees buckle. He kissed like he knew how to unmake a person. And I let him. Because Jordan never kissed me like he needed me. Because I wanted to remember what it felt like to burn. When we finally pulled apart, my lips were swollen, my thoughts scrambled. Mason stepped back, his breathing just as uneven as mine. "I'll unlock the door now," he said, voice softer. "But you'll have to decide what stays locked inside you." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He smiled, not unkindly. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a confession. He turned the key slowly, the metal sound far louder this time. "I'm not asking you to leave him," Mason said. "I'm just saying, maybe you already have." He opened the door and walked out. I stood alone, against the wall, pulse still hammering in my ears. There was no going back to the version of myself that hadn't been touched like that. Not anymore. The hardest part wasn't the kiss. It was the quiet after. That strange, ringing silence that followed me from Mason's room to the bathroom mirror. From the dock to the dinner table. It sat with me, clung to my skin like damp air. I couldn't shake him. Or worse, I didn't want to. Derek returned that afternoon, excited and oblivious. He dropped bags of groceries on the counter and began talking about a bonfire plan for the weekend. I nodded along, forcing smiles, pretending like my skin didn't still buzz with the memory of Mason's breath on my collarbone. Mason, meanwhile, played it perfectly. Cool. Detached. He barely looked at me, but I felt him in every room. Every time he laughed too loudly from across the porch. Every time he peeled an orange with that slow, deliberate grace. He was in my bloodstream, and I hated how much I needed another dose. That night, I tried calling Jordan. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I waited. No return call. No text. Not even a thumbs-up emoji. The man I was supposed to be committed to didn't have time for a 30-second phone call. I stared at the screen. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Can we talk? I miss you. I hovered over send. Then backspace. The words felt hollow. Not because they weren't true, but because they weren't enough. The next morning, I found myself walking aimlessly along the lake's edge, throwing pebbles into the water like I was 12 again. I wasn't running from Mason. I was running from the version of me that said this doesn't matter. Because it did. Every glance, every word, every second of temptation, I remembered all of it. And worse, I'd never felt more alive. Mason found me there. Of course he did. He approached from behind, his shadow stretching beside mine like it had always been there. You haven't spoken to me, he said. I'm trying to forget what happened. He paused. You'll fail. I turned to him. Why do you even care? You barely looked at me yesterday. I was giving you space. For what? Guilt. No, he said quietly. Clarity. He stepped beside me. Our shoulders didn't touch, but they could have. That almost made it worse. I'm not proud of crossing the line, I admitted. But I'm more ashamed that part of me doesn't regret it. Maybe regret and relief can exist in the same body, he said. You just never let yourself believe that before. I looked at him. You make it sound like you planned this. I didn't, Mason said. But I saw you. And I knew. Knew what? That you were already halfway gone. I just met you where you were. Back at the cabin, Derek was strumming his old acoustic guitar on the porch, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath his roof. He offered me a beer. I declined. I felt drunk on everything already. I opened my phone again. Jordan's last message was still from 3 days ago. Swamped today. Can we talk later? I typed. We need to be honest. I don't think we're in this the same way anymore. My thumb hovered. Then I deleted the message. Again. Because I still didn't know if that truth belonged to me or Mason. That evening, we all sat around the fire pit. Derek toasted marshmallows and told a story about high school. Mason laughed along, calm, collected, completely unreadable. I hated him for that. When Derek went inside to grab more drinks, Mason leaned close and murmured, "You're waiting for someone to give you permission to change your life." I flinched. "I'm trying to do the right thing." "No," he said. "You're trying not to be the bad guy." I turned to him sharply. "You think I like this? That I wanted to cheat?" His expression softened. "I think you wanted to feel chosen again. And I don't blame you for that." Later that night, alone in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and finally allowed myself the ugliest truth. Jordan hadn't ghosted me. He just stopped loving me out loud. And in the silence, I'd let someone else speak to my body. I reached for my phone and began typing again. To Jordan. I think we're pretending something's still working because we're afraid of the cost of breaking it. Then I deleted it. Again. Instead, I opened Mason's contact. Typed. What happens now? Pause. Then hit save to draft. Not send. I closed my eyes and drifted into sleep, Mason's voice echoing in my head like a whisper I wasn't ready to answer yet. Maybe you already left him. You're just the last one to admit it. Jordan finally called. Not a text. Not a voice note. An actual call. I stared at the screen until the second ring, then picked up like nothing inside me had already changed. "Hey," he said, his voice distant, casual, too normal. Sorry, things have been crazy here. I sat on the cabin's back steps, facing the lake, the morning sun warming my bare feet. You always say that. A pause. Yeah, I know. But I mean it this time. That's the problem, I said quietly. You always mean it. But it doesn't mean anything anymore. He went silent. A few birds called in the distance. The sound of something real. Jordan exhaled. What do you want me to say, Eli? I don't want a perfect line, I replied. I want to know, do you even want me anymore? He hesitated. Long enough to answer the question without words. I miss how we were, he finally said. But I don't know how to get us back there. You don't, I said. Because I'm not there anymore. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were steady, but my chest ached like I'd just torn muscle from bone. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was relief. Because for the first time, I stopped fighting to hold something that didn't fight for me. That night, Derek went to bed early. I stayed behind on the porch, watching the shadows move across the trees. The air smelled like pine and smoke and goodbye. Mason stepped outside, silent as ever, holding 2 mugs. He handed me one. Chamomile, he said. Calmer than whiskey. Less dangerous. I sipped it without a word. He sat beside me. We didn't speak for a while. Then I said, I ended it. He nodded once. I figured. I glanced at him. Aren't you going to say something reckless? Like, so now you're mine? He shook his head slowly. I'm not here to collect you like a prize. Then what are you here for? Mason turned to me, his gaze steady. To see if you'll stop hiding behind someone else's version of love and start defining your own. I leaned in. Not because I was lost, but because I'd finally chosen to want. The kiss this time was different, not urgent, not forbidden. It was slow, confident, devastating in its gentleness. Our bodies moved with a rhythm that felt less like guilt, more like surrender. We didn't undress each other. We unwrapped each other. No fear. No shame. Just skin and breath and permission. He whispered my name like it had weight. Like it meant something. And when he pressed his forehead to mine afterward, I didn't flinch. I didn't feel broken. I felt rebuilt. Morning came quietly. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Mason. His chest rose and fell with peaceful rhythm, one arm across the pillow I had left. I dressed in silence, packed light, heart strangely calm. In the kitchen, Derek scribbled a note to his mom. We're out of eggs. Again. He looked up and grinned. Leaving already? Yeah, I said. Got some thinking to do back home. He nodded without suspicion. Mason probably helped fry your brain. He gets under everyone's skin. I laughed, hollow and honest. Yeah. He really does. On the bus ride home, I watched the trees blur past like secrets I wasn't taking with me. My phone buzzed once. New message from Mason. Soon. I stared at the screen. Didn't reply. Not because I wasn't coming back to him, but because, for once, I was arriving to myself first.